Now that we know how to determine the operating point of a photovoltaic cell, we can begin to look at its power output. We know that power can be written as the product of voltage and current. So if we look at the IV curve, we see that when the voltage is 0, the power will be 0. Then, as the current drops to 0, the power will also be 0. If we look at the slopes of the curve, we can then see the power will increase to a peak and then decrease down back to 0. If we then look at our operating point, we can map this onto the power curve. The problem, however, is that this point may not be at the peak power. One way we can remedy this is by changing our load to a variable load. With a variable load, we can change the slope of the one on our curve so that it intercepts the photovoltaic power curve at the point that corresponds to maximum power. This is, however, problematic as our load may be fixed. One way to overcome this is to introduce a circuit between our photovoltaic cell and the load. This circuit is some sort of converter that maintains the voltage across the photovoltaic cell at the peak power and then the voltage across the load at its required voltage. To do this, we can use a DC-DC converter. There are several types of DC-DC converters. There are isolated, where the two sides are coupled together through an inductor. Then there are non-isolated, where the two sides are directly connected. Now that we've got the DC converter in place, we need to be able to change the voltage across the photovoltaic cell so that it's always at the maximum power. To do this, we introduce an input D to the converter. Now this input will be required to change as the power changes from the photovoltaic cell. We remember that the irradiance and the temperature will change with the IV curve, and this also changes the peak operating voltage. So this will require methods to measure the voltage and the current of the photovoltaic cell. With these measurements, we can insert them into a controller. This controller can then decide on which way to change the voltage applied to the photovoltaic cell to keep it operating at its maximum power output.